Rising Redux this evening, and it's been the first publication of the book, Jackson Rising, in 2017 was really exciting for our department. We teach from it all the time in many of our classes. The discussion of Cooperation Jackson, its development since 2014, and the network of solidarity economics and its rootedness in Black liberation and Black resistance has been an inspiration to many of our students, and we're really loving getting into this new book, which is much bigger, and I'm sure many of you have opened it up. There's a plethora of information about the connection between the work in Jackson and other social movements in the US and internationally. So we're very excited to have Akuno, Sacajawea Hall, and Matt Meyer here tonight joining us, and we'll have time for a talk and then Q&A, and I'll help moderate those questions at the end, so if you can just save questions until then, that would be wonderful, unless you all have other preferences during the talk, of course. And thank you again for joining us tonight. There are bathrooms through that exit door if folks need a restroom at any point. Oh, and we will also be recording and live streaming tonight, so it's just to let you all know.
Great, thank you so much. And I'll use the mic because I know that's helping to the live streaming and the audiovisual. And we really appreciate all of you at CIIS and at PM Press for this opportunity. My name is Matt Meyer. I'm going to start by just saying a few words about the book process as a co-editor with Kali, and also some of the imperatives that some of us who are not based in Jackson and who have and continue to take leadership from the Black liberation movement as allies and solidarity activists in terms of the importance of this book, this work, and this historical moment. So we titled this talk Build and Fight, and the program Build and Fight is something that Saki and Kali will talk about. But I think it's important to begin by looking at this whole concept of redo. And what this book is in connection to the arc and history of struggle. And the idea that for many of us, we think we are in a process, an almost constant, but a particularly urgent process of building and rebuilding. Because what it means to rebuild at this moment is more than just building as if nothing existed before. And the whole concept of our subtitle, Building the Future in the Present, is very specific. In some ways, it's something from ancient African traditions, the Sankofa moment, the West African Akan concept of looking back in order to look forward, the Sankofa vision. But it's more than just that. It's about understanding that we have histories and legacies, including recent past, that need to get revisioned, reconstructed, and rebuilt. And specifically, very specifically, the first book, as Michelle just said, has been very important to many of us who were only partially involved in that work. Certainly involved in supporting Cooperation Jackson, but that book came out as an important guidepost for many of us not based in Jackson about some of what they were doing and trying to do. And yet, as the critical thinkers and builders and organizers that they are, the idea that that book, in some ways, quickly needed to be revised, needed to be redone, that there needed to be a new building on it, both with more materials that reflected the regional, the national, and the international implications of that work, but also ways that some things in that original book that needed to be reprinted, other things needed to be taken out because the struggle had significantly changed. And some of the definitional terms, the foundational issues had shifted as foundations shift, even as we build and rebuild. So Jackson Rising Redo is an attempt to take in some ways the best of that original book, if you did or didn't read it, and build upon it for today and for tomorrow. Two of my particular and personal pieces on it, just to say, as a matter of personal privilege, a number of us who had worked in other sectors of the movement, for myself, the Puerto Rican liberation movement and independence movement, looked at the passing of Chokwe Lumumba, a giant figure in the Black liberation movement throughout the US and the world, but also central to Jackson, both as their mayor, but as a core organizer. And the death of a Puerto Rican leader, Luis Nieves Falcón, seemed like an opportunity to talk about these two fundamental struggles, fundamental both to liberation in general, but also to liberation for people within and outside of the empire, also known as the United States of America. So a piece in this book for me about Chokwe and Luis Nieves Falcón is part of looking at this international connections between peoples. And then the other piece, and this is not necessarily central to the build and fight strategy unique to Jackson, but it comes from that vision from Corporation Jackson and these two, was that when the pandemic hit, the idea that a people's strike, that a national US shutdown of business as usual in this time that was indeed very, very unusual would be an urgent task. And so they built, and many of us, myself included, helped build with them, this national and then in some ways international network that did not, I'm sorry, I don't want to give away the ending to the book. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, it's not ending, it's an ongoing thing. But just in case you weren't there, we didn't have a full people strike that shut down the United States. I'm sorry to our listeners who may not have been aware. But that's not the point, or it's not exactly the whole point. The idea of building that bold initiative, the struggles around it, the reflections of the things that worked and the things that didn't work, were things we thought important to contain in this volume as a reflection on our holistic need, our complete need, our radical need to rebuild. Looking at Corporation Jackson not as a replicable model for every locality, but as a thinking, growing, developing, building, rebuilding, organic model, an organism, a growing organization that has some clues, both very much as to how to make Jackson a more livable, a more survivable, a more liberated place, but also how we might, as radicals around the US and around the world, think about social change from the bottom up. So that's what Jackson Rising we do is for me. I guess I'll just add a few other things and then hand over the mic to these two extraordinarily inspiring figures. Also in the title of today's talk is this question of self-determination. And though it's a phrase that's used a lot, it's not necessarily a phrase that we see enacted often enough in terms of allyship. We talk a lot about allyship and about co-conspirators and about what it means to be in solidarity. But one thing it means is to build support, to build direct people-to-people, loving human support that both understands working under the leadership of leaders of the Black Liberation Movement, but also working without an assumption that we're going to play a leadership role. In fact, with a very direct assumption that we won't, but we still understand our camaraderie. And that camaraderie, I think, is central to working to build alliances, coalitions, friendships, relationships that are rooted in self-determination, but also rooted in a revolutionary project, a fervor that builds together. And then I guess the last thing I'll say is, the last phrase in the title of today's talk is across the globe. And so I mentioned already some of the Puerto Rico stuff, but I guess it's useful to say, it's important to say, some of my other work, and some of it's on the table back there, and the people at PM Press tell me I'm supposed to help sell the work. But the idea of coming out with the book, the little book, White Lives Matter Most, which is not an aspirational title. It's a book that we title in that provocative way to say, especially to those people who said, wait, don't all lives matter? That in fact the idea of Black Lives Matter Most is only radical. It's only even slightly reformist. It's only logical in a country where white lives have always mattered most, where America has always meant that white lives matter most. So if you look at America in a way that understands the empire of the place we are, and not just the nation state of where we are, that understand that Black liberation isn't just about folks of a different race in the US, but about the question of self-determinations of a peoples. and that the idea of freeing the land, and you'll hear in a few minutes, and you'll see in the pages of the book, and if you read the first one, you know very well, that free the land is a phrase predating Cooperation Jackson, but about a rootedness in land and self-determination and struggle and independence that is itself an internationalist call, that is understood best in understanding the international context of Black liberation in the US, and therefore also solidarity. So, I say it has been and continues to be an extraordinary honor to work with these folks. I've also said, as you'll find out, that somehow my name got put on the cover with colleagues as co-editors, but there really is a third co-editor who, in many ways, I feel like should be on the cover. It wasn't because of any publisher, or any pressure for Saki not to be on it, but in fact, Saki's articles in this book have consistently been explained to us, which we already knew, Polly and I already knew, as some of the most important. Because like the whole book tries to do, Saki's piece in this book really speak to some of the hard truths, some of the complicated realities of what it means to build movement under many difficult circumstances in this day and age. So I remain extraordinarily proud and happy to be with both of these two comrades as a co-editor, as a writer, and mainly as a comrade and fellow revolutionary in building this movement. That says that I'm done. It says I'm done extremely loudly. Sorry about that. Thank you, my friends. Thank you very much.
All right, good evening. Y'all have to bear with me a little bit. I'm kind of losing my voice on this tour. So let me put my own little discipline helper on. So yeah, to dive into it, I'm gonna pick up in part with some of where Matt left off, and to say that we are now, at least by my own estimation, kind of entering into phase 3 of Cooperation Jackson's development. And what I think this book does a good job of is chronicling aspects of phase 1 and 2, and kind of what we learned, what we aspired to do, some of the challenges along the way of trying to make that happen, and being very clear, one, about writing our own history so that folks down the road, don't question, people will anyway, but at least we'll have some direct source about, well, what were they thinking? What were they trying to accomplish? So it's right here. And whether we did it all and did more than that, or whether we fell short, at least the thinking and the aspirations and the intention is kind of well documented, right? And that's a lesson as an act of self-determination, of not letting others tell our story, but us doing the work to tell it ourselves. So that was very important, I think, to us. But within that, we've also learned, I'll just speak in the eye here, also learned some very lessons in that even when you tell your own story, still doesn't mean that you can control the narrative, right? Within the larger capitalistic, imperialistic framework in which we operate within, and how things that you intend to be very clear can still wind up being twisted and manipulated in various different ways against you. And our enemy forces in Mississippi are very good at that. In taking certain meanings to say that, we want to kick all the white people out of the state of Mississippi. It was like, that's you who said that. There's nowhere in there that we said anything like that, right? That's a projection of your own fear, and perhaps of your own politics, relative to us and other people. But it's also intended to kind of put you on the defensive of, well, I have to, no, stand your ground, stand the principle. But that's a key thing, I think, I wanted to share with you all. Like, just telling your own story is not necessarily enough in terms of shaping the politics around how your story gets interpreted. And that cuts across a number of different ways, right? Because one of the things it's been interesting over these past, it's almost 10 years since it's officially been founded. And it's been interesting when folks come to visit us or inquire, like, what are they interested in? And oftentimes it's like, that's the least dynamic thing about what we're doing that you're interested in. And the thing that most folks, in your mainstream media have been interested in is like the electoral politics, right? Like, how did you guys pull that off? And how did you get, and it's like, well, you do recognize that was to enable other things. That wasn't the end goal within itself. And for you to call and ask a certain way about how you did, I'm like, I remember one time being on somebody, they never aired it, but somebody from MSNBC came and they stayed like 2 days with us. And they kept trying to get us to move off of free in the land, right? Could you speak up? And I was like, look, this is what this is about. This is about self-determination. If you're not gonna do nothing about self-determination, you really you wasted your time and you wasted my time. But we're not shifting off that. We're not bending off that. The meaning of it doesn't change. That's what we're here to do. And they never aired it. And I remember them, making an argument of saying, well, isn't this just about equality? I'll never forget that. Isn't this just about equality? And I said, I'm gonna tell you, like I learned from Malcolm X, who are you to be equal to? Right? Like, you're not the standard, obviously a white person, but who are you to be equal to? You're not the standard of civilization or humanity. That's not it. I don't know. You clearly not listening to me and what I'm saying, and what our point of reference is. And we both got some work to undo this effed up relationship that we are in with each other. And either you want to join me in doing that work, and I'm down to do that work with you, or you don't, and we're gonna fight. So, like, which one is it? You make up your mind which one of these relationships you want to be in. I'm good either way, and it's not a fight out of spite, but it's like we're not going to remain in this position, And so the book, in many respects, is trying to convey that, and we wanted to, I would say very safely, we wanted to share the difficulties about doing what we're doing. So folks learn, to the degree, like, we all gonna make mistakes, just hopefully that we don't make the same mistakes. At least we can make some new mistakes, and if we study from each other, perhaps we can make some new mistakes. And so that's what, this in part is a chronicle of, but I also just wanted to convey, like, how in our work, we're very intentionally, trying to be connected to social movements all over the world. Because we don't just see this as a local, just isolated struggle. That's not what it's about. Like, you're just trying to create some local, utopia. That's a fantasy at best. And one, if anybody knows the history of Mississippi and its current reality, there's plenty of forces willing and ready to wipe that out anytime they get the opportunity to. And not it's necessarily a fair analogy, but a historical equivalent. We've had similar experiments of black folks, trying to do collective work on the land in Mississippi many times over, and they've been burnt out, right? And that's not something we want to repeat. And part of the way you don't repeat that is sharing your story to be able to build and attract allies, right? And so folks understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, and maybe can see in you someone that they are willing to work with, want to work with, so we can build upon. So for us, it's about, anchoring ourselves on the ground as strongly, as possible, to be able to deal with, all the different assaults that we know historically and currently are coming, but to link up with other folks, and having some common ground upon which to link, articulated by, ideology, politics, and then grounded practice. And then
No, that's
oh my God, I only got 2 minutes, anyway. Well, one of the critical things about this next phase that we are kind of growing into articulating this piece around build and fight. And there's an argument that we are trying to make there, which is trying to cut across ideological boundaries and bonds. And what I'm thinking about, this is using I statements, there's a particular set of arguments I'm trying to have with the left. And I'll be very clear about what I mean by that, right? I made a joke yesterday, and it was thankfully corrected by Matt. But a particular argument amongst the left, which is what I consider that's anarchists, socialists, communists, revolutionary nationalists, and folks who are invested in a radical indigenous worldview. That's what I mean, very particular. I'm not trying to change anybody's ideology with the argument that we're making, but the build and fight formula is an articulation of saying we need to be invested in a common set of shared practices with each other and coordinate our work to the greatest extent possible so we get into the habit of acting our way into new ways of thinking rather than thinking us just automatically do what our ideological points of view is going to get us to act differently. Like we got 200 plus years of I think, very cemented history now saying that doesn't particularly work. And all of our, whatever your particular form of reference are, it has its strength and it has its weakness. Neither one of them is going to be capable of transforming the world in the way it needs to be transformed, but all of us together bringing what we bring, I think, is enough to get us there. And I think that there's enough in terms of if we kind of stand back, big view picture of all the different activities we are doing a lot more than what we think is actually going on. But we got to get out of this deficit model of kind of movement orientation. It only appears that way when we're acting in small little groups and silos, and not that small groups should disband or anything like that. But there's a way in which we're going to have to figure out how to dialogue, how to plan, how to coordinate with each other to aggregate strength to be a more transformative force. So this when you see some of this articulation of why this formula piece we're talking about, starting with mutual aid, giving that more definition and clarity, recognizing its weaknesses, the necessity around food sovereignty, the necessity around worker self-organization. We want to add in the element around community production, not just for localization, but also for ecological reasons and appropriate kind of technology and mastering technology. And then the broad question of how we make decisions together through people's assembly, so we're not just kind of working in small little groups and silos. And that, we think if we can do that through all our kind of, in San Francisco and Oakland, or even in particular neighborhoods, we can aggregate, I think, with a level of speed and clarity to meet the serious challenge that we are facing around, ecocide and the rise of fascism. So I just want to leave folks with that and turn it over to Saki.
A huge point to lead with, to end with, or to transition to me with. So I think that, So let me back up. One, I'm not feeling that well. My voice is fine. Kylie, I think yours is doing okay, but I'm physically not feeling that well. So I'm going to speak briefly and then make sure we all want to really have time to be able to talk. So I feel like I'll talk more as an exchange. So I'm Sacajawea Hall, Saki. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm one of the co-founders of Cooperation Jackson. I'm really excited that we'll be celebrating our 10th anniversary in May, which is coming up so soon, right? This year is almost over. And I'm glad that not only do we have this I like how you say redo, and it's redux. I've been calling it a remix. Book, and we've, here and there been going to different places and talking about it. I think that not only in the timing of like where things are at now, but like even in the timing of the organization's start and growth and challenges and development, to be able to be sharing that and having exchanges and talking as we kind of like move into year 10 and what Kali is calling the third phase of Cooperation Jackson, I think is really important, and it has helped between finishing up the writing and then being able to look back at it and talk about it, to really do some deep reflecting on what's next for me personally and the organization and in relationship to the organization, right? And like, what do we really need to be able to strengthen the foundation, strengthen and sharpen our practice, and try as much as possible to ensure that the organization can sustain itself, and to continue to play a role and maybe play a bigger role moving forward as we try to build out this like local ecosystem and solidarity economy and all the different aspects of it that we've been talking about and being able to experiment with, and then even more so like being able to connect and help ourselves and other communities like sharpen our tools, and so early on, a lot of us did a lot of things, and I wore a bunch of different hats, and I think it was at like some point where we were like, we gotta kind of dig in deep in a few areas, and so that's when I think took on more so the holding down and the coordination of the operations of the organization. And so the operations is like the administration and finance, and I also include in that like group collective care work. I'm also the anchor, like the point person for our Fannie Lou Hamer Community Land Trust. And both Matt and Kali mentioned Free the Land, and so our organization comes out of the Black radical history and Black liberation movement that has I think at one of the centers, this idea that has become a more popularized slogan of Free the Land. And for us, we've focused on using a US-based tool of community land trust to be able to prioritize for ourselves acquiring land and taking it off the speculative market, and really trying to raise, highlight, and hopefully increase more and more the consciousness and the idea and the commitment to decommodifying land and housing. And so that was really important for us from the very beginning. We've been really successful in doing that over the years, and doing it through the generous donations and philanthropy funds that we've gotten, and we've also been, I think, blessed in a lot of ways to be able to have folks support the idea of us using it in that way, because that's not very common within the arena and the nonprofit industrial complex. And so we see the space in a broader way than a lot of community land trusts in the US. So a lot of times you hear about it, if you don't know about it, it's like one of the ways to create and make permanently affordable housing, right? And then also a big focus of it is how to make ownership of housing possible for people who otherwise wouldn't be able to own it, right? And so the ownership of the housing is not the focus for us. And definitely in Jackson, with generations and generations of folks, working hard to be able to own land. We're thinking and talking about, like, how do we help people stay? How do we keep the land in the stewardship of the community? We have a huge opportunity with having most of the land being vacant. And so how do we explore, things like eco-villages? How do we explore making our areas not only better in terms of housing quality and affordability and deep affordability, but also like space for us to gather and space for us to, enjoy ourselves and commune and like reestablish a lot of the relationships that have been hurt from just constant oppression and exploitation and extraction, right? And then how do we also work with each other and work in line with Mother Earth and helping to restore and create things that can be regenerative, right? And so, the idea of land being a basis of self-determination and liberation for us, we take really seriously. And then, it's like, so we've been able to have the opportunity where, as we're developing co-ops, and they're in different parts of kind of like I'm thinking the word, tell me that's not the word I'm trying to use, different phases of their development, they've been able to, and we've been able to, do financial planning without having to think about and without having to worry about rent. And that, I think that's also like a really, really big critical piece, right? I'm looking over here, the folks from the co-op grocery here in San Francisco. And so I guess because I probably am not keeping it super brief, that I wanted to mention, one of the parts of juggling so many things and juggling raising a family and little people and, beginning to dig in even, I felt like this work has been a part of like my being. And it really was once I came back home to New York in 2002, where I began the journey of actively being a part of this movement and not only like thinking about it or reading about it or like feeling it in my soul. And transitioning from New York to Atlanta and then Atlanta to Jackson, there was just like a really hard thing to do, and a lot of self-sacrifice that we've had to make, and a growing appreciation of not only like our ancestors and like the freedom fighters who many are still actually among us, but even just like family and women, like and the Black women and the Latino women that I grew up with that had way less privilege than myself, but like really worked together to be able to provide safety, security, and share resources. And so the pushing myself to be able to contribute to this book in a very different way than the first book, I think was a reminder, was a reminder of like the continuous struggle for people who don't have a lot to be trying to do so much, but then also for women, and I'm a Black woman, so I'll speak as a Black woman, to struggle between like, am I neglecting my kids to be doing this work and doing so much of it all the time, right? Like, am I shortchanging them, but then I'm not, but then like, this is so important for them and the next several generations, and just kind of like that internal struggle and dialogue, which is which is less practical than like how hard it is to be working 80 hours a week and like trying to convince people that they too are a part of, and not only like working with, but like creating and the leadership of. But yeah, so I'm starting to talk more about the less popular, sometimes less visible and a lot of times invisible background work that keeps our organization going, that helps to keep, people paid really. And then also, structurally, the structural work that, and the interpersonal work. And I think that like we have to, not only Cooperation Jackson, but everybody, like we have to be really, really looking at and thinking about and talking about the interpersonal work that is at the core to what Kali was talking about, and the hope that we have. I think the reason why the book is so much bigger is like there are a lot of other folks doing work all over the place that is, that's working and that's important and that is related to what we're doing. And we have to figure out how to make the time to strengthen those relationships, because they create bonds, and that bond is creating that glue and it's like super glue for us to be able to really shift the tides. So I'll stop there, and we're gonna open it up so that we can take questions or comments and have a bit of an exchange. Thanks.